Today we're going to talk about what you can do to increase the chances of winning one of these ugly statues. Hey, I think I can hold more of these. Yeah, where's the rest? For many of us, winning a Golden Demon trophy has been a childhood dream. And today I'm going to tell you my experiences with Golden Demon competitions, the conclusions that I draw from them, and what you can do, in my opinion, to increase your chances of fulfilling your lifetime goal of winning one of these ugly statues. Actually, I do quite like them, even though everyone else keeps telling me how ugly they are. Golden Demons have their own set of rules. They are in a really unique place because they are a painting competition run by a corporation, and you're only allowed to enter the miniatures by that corporation. This also means you are within a frame of background and backstory by Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy, or Age of Sigmar as it is called now, and also within a frame of how Games Workshop markets the miniatures and how their team paints the miniatures, and how they can possibly market Golden Demon winning entries in that frame. Therefore, going in, you have to accept that the Golden Demons are probably not the place to show off your crazy painting technique and style of interpretation of their stuff. And that creativity and interpretation might lose versus neatly, methodically executed paint jobs. Now, since this guide is meant to be as holistic as possible, I will also talk a bit about the framework that current Golden Demon competitions are set in as compared to maybe the past, where we had a lot more competitions all over the world and there wasn't just one jury judging all the competitions. So our first point will be about location. It has never been so easy or so hard, depending on where you live in the world, to win a Golden Demon. Basically, if you live close enough to travel to the UK or the new Continental Warhammer Fest European Union, which will probably stay in Germany, you are among the lucky ones. If you live overseas or really far from Europe, tough luck, since Games Workshop scraped all games days, as they were called, that used to take place in the US. Canada, France, Italy, Spain, and even Poland had 2 Golden Demon competitions in the past. There was also 2 of them in Japan, if I remember correctly. However, they still have 3 themed Golden Demon events at the Open Days in Nottingham, with only a few categories. This leads us to advice number 1. Go to a smaller event. Try competing at the Open Day Golden Demons. It is less categories, but it typically also has less international attendees. In general, these Golden Demons have the flair of a local painting competition, with only a handful of international competitors and only a few local stars at these mini Golden Demons who were able to farm these for Slayer swords and gold trophies in the past. Giving out Slayer swords for these wasn't a bright idea in my opinion, and it angered a lot of people, but Games Workshop at least rectified that now, only giving out Slayer swords for the Warhammer Fests in the UK and in Germany. If your goal is to win a Golden Demon once in your life, try your luck at one of these mini Golden Demons. Golden Demons in general are a bit of a lottery, but you could be lucky to attend an event where a density of quality might be lower due to what has already been said. If you don't want to win the Golden Demon by the lack of painting royalty present alone, there's a few more things that you can consider, for example, what the jury might be looking for. Now remember, this list is compiled off of experience with entering the Golden Demons, analyzing past winners in the current judging regime, and talking to a range of painters and attendees of Golden Demons. Your entry should be easily readable. A bit of a meta thing to look at, as this can be applied to multiple levels of a paint job. From a zoomed out position, it could be a compositional level, your piece being too crowded or base details obscuring your miniature, or two dual protagonists not interacting clearly enough with each other. Or as simple as positioning your piece at a golden ratio in the frame itself, or not. On a large level, if we look at this piece by Roman Lapard, we can still see what is going on. There is a movement of the swarm that is dynamic and culminates on the most important part of the story. We will come back to this entry later. Let's focus on single models at the moment. A simple example is to look at this paint job by Darren Latham, who constantly places in the open competition as a Games Workshop employee, which to me is a poster boy example of what judges might be looking for in an entry. Using a striking tetradic color scheme, you can see that the highlights and shades are very heavy metal style with dark lining and strong edge highlights and minimal shading and highlighting. For example, the slight white highlight and a brownish shade on the yellow gun. There's almost no highlights on the actual panels of the armor, except for a few indicated lines that the viewer's eye completes almost automatically and some strategically placed dots that indicate brighter reflections on the edges. Everything is neatly distinguished and clearly readable as your eyes explore the piece. Very pleasing to look at, but nothing exceptionally innovative. Let's look at this piece by head judge Max Vallée. Very similar approach, contrasting edge highlights and distinguished panels and minor highlights on the areas. This is a style that repeatedly does well in the competition. A general theme that you can follow here is try to make your blending smooth and clean, and try to aim for high contrast to draw the viewer in. Something that Christopher Jonsson did here. Personally, I think trying to keep your contrast high while retaining as much smoothness and neatness as possible is the best approach here. We all know that this is difficult to do, but it usually pays off to perfect that balance. Trying to do heavy metal plus, for example, Angelo Di Cello's Sales Sword winning entry here has an heavy metal studio feeling to it, is something you want to achieve. Which leads us to point number 3, you have to somewhat step up the heavy metal style. At this point it might be a good idea to look at what the official rules have to say. The judges look for many different qualities in a winning entry. Technical skill, atmosphere, consistency in quality, and narrative are all key components in what makes a winning entry stand out. The painting isn't just about technical prowess, however. It's about finding a style and technique that works for you and applying it with care. The judges have no set preference when it comes to style. As long as it looks amazing, there are no rules as to how you go about it. And while the last part stays deliberately vague, there is a clear message here. Whatever you do, try to stay consistent in quality.
How do you balance those different styles as judges? Do you just have to look for things that set them apart?
Yeah, I think I don't think there's a specific style that weighs heavier than any other. So it's about how you have implemented that style and how I guess there's certain universal traits that transcend style, that if it's like done meticulously and with a lot of care and effort, that shines through no matter what style it is, and that's the sort of stuff that we're looking for, I think.
That also means if you want to impress the judges by more than just neat but simple gradients on your entries, you need to make sure these more complicated approaches have to be applied consistently on all of the miniature. Let's look at what some painters do to score extra points and make their pieces stand out in the competition. Gareth Nicholas, who is now working for Games Workshop but has been entering Golden Demons before, for example, does a lot of the traditional edge highlighting and has a very Games Workshop style. But he also adds another layer on top of that. He does do a lot of secondary reflections and reflection patterns, especially on the armors and the gold. Go back and compare them to a more traditional approach by, for example, Max Vallée. Another aspect are these electrostatic lines on the power weapon. Note how he still has the edge highlights to keep in line with the heavy metal style, how he's keeping the blendings sharp and on point, and he's staying in line with the premise of consistency and quality, but also showing that he can do what others maybe can't. And look at that, it seems like bases don't matter after all. A lot of people have found approaches that worked, and they keep repeating the recipes on all of their Golden Demon entries. David Soper not only has perfected his color choices and compositions using global highlight and shadow colors and always manages great intensity and contrast, also typically paints painstakingly intricate texture on almost all of his surfaces. It is the embodiment of trying to show that you can paint meticulously and flawless on a whole model, and it resonates very well with the judges. Again, consistency and quality is what counts and makes these guys do well in competitions, reducing the amount of elements that could be viewed as errors. Before you take the leap into more complicated highlight patterns, freehands or texture, make sure that you are able to pull it off. If you're unsure how to do texture, don't do it. Stick to trying to perfect your blendings, divide panels and work on your contrast. Additional details always add the possibility for areas that could be viewed as imperfections, being rushed or not used consistently. At a certain point in miniature painting competitions and a certain quality of these, especially if they do involve picking a first, second and third place, it becomes easier to point out the errors that someone made instead of trying to find arguments for why this particular paint job was better than the other. Entering the Golden Demon is not a place for that fancy new technique you learned yesterday. It is the place to show what you can do and can do well and consistently. Sometimes you might hear one of the judges say there is texture and then there's texture. Texture doesn't mean just putting down a few dots on an area. There is a certain way to build it up along with the highlights that looks more credible, more pleasing. And if the judges see an otherwise well-painted miniature and a couple of dots that don't look like texture at all, ruining the effect, then an entry like that is easily dismissed. This also means be a perfectionist. Don't take shortcuts. Paint everything as meticulously as you can and make sure the quality doesn't vary. Make all elements complement a general theme. Some painters try to score additional points by showing they have a particular talent in one aspect of creating entries, for example, trying to impress the judges by painting extensive freehands on banners, for example, or they are creating dramatic, large bases for their entries. Oversized banners and huge bases just to draw attention to your piece don't really work usually. If you want to do a banner because you are really good at freehands, make sure it doesn't take away attention from the actual miniature, but complements it. Remember, your entry should be well balanced and of equal quality in all aspects. So if you paint the perfect miniature but your freehand is not up to the same standard because some line work maybe isn't clear enough or your blendings on a canvas are not as smooth as on a miniature, it will most likely cost you points and you would be better off leaving the banner. The same goes for freehands on capes or armor plates. Don't plaster your piece with skulls just for the sake of having each square millimeter covered in something impressive. Make sure the patterns make sense for the miniature. Work with the theme and are subtle enough to not take away too much attention from the rest of the paint job. I think a good example is my diorama entry that took silver in Germany in 2018 despite being painted in 2009. This is a standard bearer of an army with the general standing atop a trench-scarred battlefield watching the battle unfold. It would make sense that an army standard would be decently sized, yet it doesn't overpower the piece, it complements it and adds to the story. This brings us to point number 6. Do tell a story. Going back to what is written on the official homepage, we find that the background and setting is important as well. The judges will be looking at how well the entry fits into Games Workshop's different worlds and universes. A strong narrative can go a long way towards grabbing the judges' attention. My Crude Collector that won gold in 2013 in Germany is a good example. I took an existing figure, modified it slightly and added additional armor plates and hijacked weaponry. The idea behind it was Crudes collecting different genes to improve, but that behavior might also show in collecting trophies or weapons and armor that they could use to improve their gear. So the heavy bolter that this guy installed on his mount clearly tells a story. The freehand's not only complementing that narrative, but also invite you to explore the piece and maybe will even make you try to find out how many different factions you can find on here. Mamikan Kachikian created an interesting and effective story here with minimal effort. And Roman Lapard's last like piece from the beginning of the video is also a good example of storytelling. Background is important. Find a great scene from one of the novels, from the backstory of the rulebooks, an iconic artwork, or simply do a goofy scene with some nerdlings doing ridiculous stuff at the feet of a Death Guard Marine like Chris Clayton did here. Granted, it is easier done for some entries. Diorama and Duel come to mind here, but try to put something into your entry that the judges want to find out more about. Now, this isn't for everyone, I know that, but if it's well executed, you can definitely score additional points here. Taking the narrative to another level leads us to point 7. Do an entry that embodies Warhammer. We have talked a lot about single miniature entries and a tiny bit about dioramas and storytelling and how important background is. Sometimes the latter becomes so much more important than the actual paint job quality on the miniature or miniatures that entries win based on being the embodiment of what Warhammer is alone. It is a bit contradictory since often we heard it is a painting competition, bases don't matter so much, and emphasis is on the paint job, but again, don't underestimate them saying the judges will be looking at how well the entry fits into Games Workshop's different worlds and universes. This doesn't just mean paint your Ultramarines blue and your Chaplains black.
Oh, no, you didn't.
But this means that sometimes going crazy and doing a big out-of-the-box entry can go a long way. There have been examples where less was more, and one example we can find is the Slayer Sword winner from Warhammer Fest Germany in 2018. Now let me explain what I mean in more detail in order to not be misunderstood here. Remember that we established that consistency of quality is important, and higher consistent quality typically trumps lower consistent quality in most categories. With the addition of the "this is Warhammer" wow factor, the lines of this rule get blurred a bit. Take the banner of the Might of Khorne diorama for example. It is an interesting factor in the composition, but viewed on its own and put on a single miniature, both size-wise and quality-wise, it would not categorize as outstanding quality or adequate complementing detail as we talked about before. It is basically a canvas painting without a particularly thought-out composition to complement the miniature carrying it. The individual pieces would not win a single miniature or squad category, and while the contrast on individual miniatures is high, they all kind of melt into a red wall that decreases readability. There is no place for the eye to rest, and it's a really busy piece. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm mentioning this to illustrate my point of the Warhammer factor being more important than other factors sometimes, not to talk down the piece. On the last slide by Roman Lapard, we already mentioned readability is intact and the story is clear even though the individual models blur together, which in this case even reinforces the feeling of an overwhelming stream of Tyranids clashing into the rocks, changing direction to chase the protagonist, and so on. In the midst of all of that, it also tells individual stories of fallen heroes and heroic deeds in the face of demise. Yet the paint quality on all of the individual pieces can never be up to the standard we would expect from single models. At this point, composition and storytelling become the factor of an archetype event in the Warhammer 40k universe, a world overrun by Tyranids, that made it win the Slayer Sword in 2013. I didn't quite know where to put this in my narrative of the video, so I put it at the end, and the question is, does choice of model matter? I get this question a lot, usually followed by the assumption that newer releases and especially factions that sell better than others will typically do better in the competition than older pieces. I will add that I have not done extensive research into this, but I would like to say that browsing through the UK and mainland European results of the last years, I have not found a particular bias to Space Marines or Stormcast. Generally, there was a healthy mix of different factions among the winners. Obviously, there is still surges of popular models during particular release cycles. In 2018, I noticed a great number of Nurgle-themed entries and winners, but I would generally attribute surges like that not to the fact that judges are pushing new releases, but to people generally tending to enter more of the new releases. Because they usually have a certain draw and novelty factor to them and get bought a lot, even by painters. There's still individuals judging the competition and not the corporation directly. And I'm not claiming that I know the judges, but I have gotten to know them as human beings who enjoy miniatures and great paint jobs the same way any other painter does.
I think it's just great seeing all these guys from around the world. They just commit to these amazing, almost pieces of art, like they hundreds and hundreds of hours pouring over this stuff, bringing them on this one day.
And I honestly don't think that the judges will deliberately push towards a corporate policy. I think that would probably do them injustice. Ultimately, they're human, have a certain taste, and are socialized within a corporation that they work for, and they will make decisions that sometimes we might disagree with. In the end, you have to go and compete in Golden Demons with the correct mindset. Take them for what they are. They're a company-run event that has an unwritten set of rules within a corporate frame, and I know it is difficult, and I have been guilty of not following my own advice here, but painting competitions are already very subjective. Golden Demons can be a lottery, and your outcome highly depends on what category you're entering, what other entries show up in your categories, and what approach their creators took. Be sure to understand what you're signing up for when you're entering, and don't be sad or even discouraged to keep painting if your outcomes don't match your expectations. Golden Demons are not the end-all of painting competitions and not the bleeding edge of creativity in miniature painting. In the end, whatever you do, painting should make you happy, and the mindset that is too competitive or having to adjust your painting style to something that will do better in a competition, in a very specific and limiting painting competition, can spoil the fun. Don't underestimate that. Let me know what you think about entering the Golden Demons. Have I missed an aspect that would be important to know? Are you thinking about entering but are too intimidated? Have I managed to alleviate that fear somewhat, or have I made it even worse? Leave a comment in the comment section, give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and share it with your friends. It really helps a lot. Let me take a minute to say thank you to everyone who has been supporting me in the month of March. I have had overwhelmingly positive feedback to my content, people sharing the videos around, great attendance to the live streams, people buying t-shirts and hoodies, and we had about 22 new patrons joining up, putting me closer to the numbers I need to do content creation as a full-time job. And I would like to say thank you at this point. I honestly don't take it for granted. We are just about halfway where I need to be with the Patreon to lose the other things I need to do to earn a living wage, and I'm confident that if we can keep the momentum up, we could get there within about half a year. If you would like to support my dream of being able to create content for your enjoyment like these guys on the left did, check out my Patreon and maybe consider pledging. At the $2 level, for example, you do get access to the YouTube videos, typically 2 to 3 weeks ahead of schedule, and you can join our community Discord. Thanks again, guys, stay creative, keep having fun with painting, and I see you next video. Thanks again, guys, stay creative, keep having fun with painting, and f***ing hell.